Well, joining us now with his take on the president's border visit and more is Christopher Bedford, senior editor of the Common Sense Society. Chris, great to see you again. A lot to get to tonight. But first, I'm going to get your thoughts on President Biden's long-awaited and some say long overdue trip to the southern border in Texas.
I think the governor of Texas, Abbott, has a point here where the president has not necessarily been serious about the border during his administration so far. He gave a speech. He announced this visit last week. And in that speech, he said that in his first few days in office, he issued executive orders to strengthen border security. But that's not true. He actually repealed a lot of the more effective aspects of the Trump administration's border security through executive order. He said that they've been enforcing Title 41, but so far, even though they've been asked to by the courts, the federal government has not been doing that. And he said he's taking this thing seriously, but so far his actions have not been like that. Well, he sent money, for example, on his recent omnibus. That money is not allowed to go toward actually securing the border, making arrests, detaining illegal immigrants. And the bishop is correct here as well, that the Biden administration promised a more orderly and a more humane immigration system, but that doesn't necessarily mean open borders. It also doesn't necessarily mean stronger borders. But what it does mean is breaking the cartel's hold that they have over this right now. What we see at the southern border is not a tale of just young people and women fleeing from oppression. What we're seeing is a cartel-controlled operation and a human smuggling operation like the world's never seen before.
Yeah, and there's been a lot of talk, as you know, about the city of El Paso cleaning up shop, so to speak, in preparation for Biden's visit. Chris, what more do you know about this? And wouldn't it make more sense for the president to see what's really happening at the border?
Of course, it would make more sense for that, but there's a strong incentive amongst both his staff and his allies to keep him away from that. One of the reasons that President Biden was selected as the nominee for the Democratic Party is because he did not fall down the rabbit hole of more insane or more radical policies regarding immigration, such as decriminalizing crossing the border. He refused to do that. But once in the administration, a lot of the folks who work in that White House disagree with that. They may be part of the more radical wing of the White House. And at the end of the day, they don't have, because of the constraints of some of the ideological promises they've made, they don't have the tools necessary to actually fix this crisis without alienating portions of their base. And that might be a concern for the White House staff and Biden's allies.
And also, as you know, Chris, this visit to Texas comes along with talk that President Biden is preparing a 2024 campaign launch. I want to get your thoughts on that. And do you think this trip to the border was actually sincere or more self-serving?
I think it is politics. Just like this is not just with the president. This is with essentially all politicians. There's a lot of posturing on different things, especially when there's no actual action to back it up. And it's not surprising to me, though, that he's going to want to run for re-election. Maybe if the Republicans had made the massive gains that they'd expected in the Senate and the House of Representatives, he may decide, I've done my time and it's time for me to step aside. But if you're President Joe Biden and you've defeated Donald Trump, who beat Hillary Clinton, the standard bearer of the Democratic Party, and then you actually held off the red wave, you've got to be feeling pretty good. And you've got to feel like maybe you've got another 4 years in you, even though the world and the country may be watching and seeing the effects of age on the president. Of course, politicians are rarely that self-reflective.
I want to pivot now to the other big story this week. Kevin McCarthy, now Speaker of the House, but it took days of negotiations and 15 rounds of voting for him to get that gavel. Your take on that battle, Chris, and what do you make of the concessions and rules that come part and parcel with his election?
Yeah, it took something. What we witnessed over the last week is something that a lot of congressmen and most staff have never seen, which is regular order on the House floor, actual debate, actual going back and forth, votes that weren't certain, negotiations between parties. And because of this, while they were called terrorists and insurrectionists and all these things, the folks who were actually pushing for these rule changes were able to return Congress to maybe what it looked like before the Trump administration or a few years prior to get back some of that actual regular order and re-empower the U.S. Congress. Now, what they did, though, is a double-edged sword, because while they won that battle, they created a lot more work for themselves. Washington, D.C. politicians generally don't like to do the hard work of oversight or actual orderly once-a-month appropriations. Or subcommittee gaveling seats. These are the things that they negotiated. So we're going to see that. Of course, all of this hope and all this work that they've done to make Congress more democratic, essentially, is going to run up against Mitch McConnell and Chuck Schumer in the Senate, and they will, at the end, be the arbiters of what can be decided, unless Congress wants to play hardball with them.
Chris, we have about 30 seconds left or so, but what else is on your radar? What are you tracking?
I want to see what Kevin McCarthy does with this new majority, and if he's willing to play that hardball. There's a lot of different priorities that he's set out, whether it's parental rights, et cetera, or money for the border, or taking money away from the IRS that the Senate and the executive branch are not going to go along with. Is he actually going to reassert the power of the purse? Is he going to make things difficult? Will he threaten funding for Ukraine in order to get this passed? In the next few weeks, we're going to see just how serious he is, or if we're going to get the classic Republican responses, which is, I just don't have the power, you need to vote in 2 more years, and there's nothing more to do.
And Chris, always great to get your insights. We always appreciate it. Thanks so much.
Thank you.